Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me on this Thursday night for Into the Outer Realms. I am your interstellar host and cosmic traveler, Joy Medea, bringing you episode 190 of this show from the center of the world, live from the Creative Cottage here in Eastern Ohio. Eugenics, period. I dressed up a little, which I usually do for guests. I'm a lot more casual with my pop culture t-shirts and Scullies and whatnot most nights when I'm solo or when Craig and I are doing Sinister Mysteries. But I have presented workshops and written about eugenics quite a bit. I've done a couple of shows for different stations, done some programming here on Into the Outer Realms about eugenics, packaged with my novel and musical that's being produced later this year in Los Angeles, an exciting project, Three Gothic Doctors and Their Sons. But I wanted to do eugenics just on its own. And a lot of what you're going to hear tonight is quotes from eugenicists because they are horrific. They're some of the most hateful, elitist things that I have ever read in my entire life. I was astonished years ago when I first started doing research on eugenics. A lot of the names are going to be familiar. If you saw the banner for this evening's show, you recognize at least some of the people. Right there is Adolf Hitler. People would like to think that the Third Reich, that Nazi Germany invented eugenics. And it was a thing that happened during that horrific period of World War II, and suddenly it went away. No, it existed 60 years prior, and it consists to this very day. And that's why it's important for me to talk about it tonight. So let's roll the opening. I'm going to come back and I'm going to dive right in. Thank you. Please, I don't normally say like, share, all of that kind of thing. This is important. This show is a precursor to a show or two shows that I want to do sometime next summer because the schedule is full between Sinister Mysteries and a lineup of extraordinary guests that I have for you. And I'm getting requests to do book reviews and for people to come on the show all the time. So I'm saying yes to those things. But I want to do transhumanism. And this is eugenics is the precursor to transhumanism. And transhumanism is in process. It is happening. So again, welcome to the show. And it's going to be a tough hour, but I think a very important one.
There exists a realm beyond our wildest dreams, a realm beyond reality that the gatekeepers and guardians have always told us consists of nothing but tricks of the eye, weather balloons, swamp gas, sand cranes, fairy tale myths of monsters, crackpot conspiracy theories, and desperate cries for attention.
We know this realm exists, and it's just beyond the horizon. The preset path, the well-worn walkways where the cynics want us to stay.
Instead, give this a listen. Put on your headphones, adjust your volume, close your eyes, and fasten your mental seatbelts because the twilight-tinged turnoff from reality's alluring highway is looming just ahead.
We're about to leave the plane of the easily explained, couldn't possibly be's, and the no way I just saw what I saw's, for the spaces and places where everything is possible, and if you stay long enough, even probable. We're about to take a journey into the outer realms.
All right. So eugenics began in England in the late 1880s. This is a time that H.G. Wells is writing. Dr. Moreau, Frankenstein has been out a long time. This is when Jekyll and Hyde is being written, and these are cautionary tales. This is and some of it is agenda as you're going to find out tonight, disturbingly, not just cautionary tales. But this is the struggle of using medicine, of using technology, and using the Industrial Revolution to try to control eugenics, to genetics, the gene pool, the population. Dracula, another story from this time, is very much a symbol for the pollution of pure Western European blood by Eastern Europeans. It is all over the place with this material. And tonight I want to frame it and get a context going for it. Good evening, Laurie. Eugenics began in England, like I said, in the late 1800s. A man named Robbie Gossman, who was a German zoologist and medical professor, he wrote in 1880 these words: "The Darwinian worldview must look upon the present sentimental conception of the value of the life of a human individual as an overestimate, completely hindering the progress of humanity." So 1880, even earlier than I said. Now, someone was quick to jump in, someone that I know that does Chautauqua, that portrays Charles Darwin, knows a lot about Darwin and other naturalists, was quick to say, hey, Darwin was not a eugenicist. He would roll over in his grave if he knew what was going on. Many people who constellated around Darwin, many of the students of Darwin's students, and sometimes we know how this goes, how things get corrupted in iterations over generations, claimed Darwin as part of eugenics. So there you go, the Darwinian worldview. What you hear right there, the Darwinian worldview must look upon the present sentimental conception of the value of the life of a human individual as an overestimate, completely hindering the progress of humanity. This is tame compared to what you're going to hear in the next hour. Now, Francis Galton, half cousin of Charles Darwin, studied families of some of history's greatest thinkers and concluded that genius was hereditary. This is a dangerous idea. Back in the times of the Greeks and the Romans, so before rational humanism, before the Renaissance, genius was a sort of supernatural, mystical companion that helped the artist, that helped the creative. But then when genius became interior to a human being, oh, he is a genius. That person shows real genius. This has been to the detriment of creatives, scientists, a lot of people. So there you go. Now, Galton knew his Greek because he coined the term eugenics, using the Greek for good, genes. Eugenics, good genes. And that's what this is about. So Galton launches a movement calling for society to take steps to promote the more suitable races or strains of blood. There you go. That's Dracula, polluting the bloodlines, literally polluting the blood. If you think about any vampire story, it's about the pollution of the blood by this foreign, whatever it is, from typically a foreigner, from an Eastern European. All the symbology is right there. The sexual repression and all of that kind of thing, yes, absolutely. But it is about the polluting of the blood by the point of view. So the pure bloods want to protect their blood. This is Aryanism. This is nationalism, right? And we're dealing with it today in a lot of ways. Galton said, what nature does blindly, slowly, and ruthlessly, man may do providently, quickly, and kindly. So again, usurping nature. This is the idea of Frankenstein, Jekyll and Hyde, Island of Dr. Moreau especially. We don't have to wait for nature to take its course to purify the gene pool, to keep it strong, right? These hints of Darwinianism, survival of the fittest. We can do it through technology, medicine, and a ruthless will. And so it takes politics and it takes science. And that was very much what we're seeing today. Charles writes, politicians found that they could do exactly what they wanted to do, sell it to their classist backers that it was for the good of humanity. Yes, absolutely. But there's an elitism. Woodrow Wilson, Craig and I did a Sinister Mysteries, and we're going to do Henry Kissinger. These are guys that I think there's a deep sickness within that combines with the elitism that allows them to do the will of their classicist backers, and boy, are we in a world of hurt in this modern time with everything going on because of this mentality. Human progress depends on promoting reproduction by the best people in the best combinations, preventing the unworthy from having children. So this is the other piece about it, the false sterilization that we're going to talk about tonight. Now, there was early support of this in the United States. Please keep this in mind. It makes it easier to swallow that there were many, the Rockefellers and Henry Ford and many other Americans who supported what Adolf Hitler was doing in a certain way. Recall that Roosevelt turned ships back from American harbors full of Jews who he knew were going to meet their deaths. The early U.S. support came from this idea of wealthy old families of Boston, the so-called Brahmins. And again, power of their bloodlines, fathers and sons, hereditary. If you look at our political world now and where people are positioned, especially in the current administration, but it happens in all administrations, but I'm seeing it especially in the current administration, you are seeing sons of people who are connected to horrific people. I've spent so much time and continuing to spend so much time as are people like Whitley Webb and Max Blumenthal connecting dots, looking at who these people are. Our current Secretary of State, this Jeffrey Epstein thing comes out, right? Ghislaine Maxwell, daughter of Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell's chief advisor was the father of our current Secretary of State. If you look at Robert Maxwell's ties to Mossad and other things, this becomes highly problematic. So here again, fathers and sons. Jared Kushner, son-in-law to Donald Trump, very tight with Benjamin Netanyahu. Interesting, yes. H.G. Wells, let's talk about him here. I love his books, hate his theories, hate what led him to write them and the doctrine that he was pushing. So 1896 is the Island of Dr. Moreau. Wells applies genetic manipulation to evolution. That's what it's all about. He said there is only one sane and logical thing to be done with a really inferior race, and that is to exterminate it. Well, sir, I ask you, what gives you the right to determine who is a really inferior race? This is colonialism. This is empirism. This is very much Britain, but it's also the Dutch, and it's also the French, and it's also the Spanish, and all the things that I cover when I do my golden age of piracy stuff. This is all of a piece to me. Let me give you a little background on Wells, because he was bitter. This is, again, echoes what Charles was saying, what I was saying too. The egocism, disappointment. Obviously, Adolf Hitler's disappointments as an art student, as an artist, drove him. Some of his early political humiliations drove him to do the things that he did. He wins a scholarship from Normal School of Science, which is now the Royal College of Science, under Thomas Huxley, a biologist and a disciple of Darwin. There you go. The disciple passing it on to the student and it getting distorted down the road. After 3 years at this prestigious school, Wells fails his qualifying exams. He is a washout as a scientist. He cannot be a scientist, but he's going to write about science, and he's still going to write about his ideas. His main theme is that humanity improves only by giving power to a self-selected caste of enlightened technicians governed by science. Frankenstein, Jekyll, Moreau. It's all right there. The mad scientist who's going to usurp God, if you want to do that, or nature, or the natural order of things for this agenda of pure bloodlines and the betterment of humanity. But only certain parts of humanity, which you can't do. It's humanity. When you start breaking it up, it's inhumane. He called these people, these enlightened technicians, of which he was not smart enough, have a high enough aptitude to join. He called them the New Republicans. Interesting. The samurai, total inaccuracy there. And the open conspiracy, right? That's like the know-nothings and all these different other groups that have come up. basically an idealized version of the elite socialist group, the Fabian Society, if you know anything about those. Thomas Huxley, I do not think was part of the Huxley family of Aldous and Julian, but I'm going to talk about them tonight. Shadow, thanks for joining. I know you're right in with this kind of stuff here. So, continuing with Wells, in something called Anticipations, he writes, "The new republic would have no use for a multitude of contemptible and silly creatures." So now they're not only inferior, they're contemptible and they're silly. Fear-driven, helpless, useless, unhappy, hatefully happy, in the midst of squalor, dishonor, feeble, ugly, inefficient, born of unrestrained lusts, and increasing and multiplying through sheer incontinence and stupidity. It sounds like a lower life form. It sounds like a rabidly breeding lower life form, not fellow humans who are living in part in poverty and all of these things that they're condemning because of their own policies as elitists, not seeing that this is all of a piece, that they're creating the conditions. But that, again, that's the elitist way. Create the conditions so then you can come in with your particular solution. And, as Craig and I are telling you, and I'm going to keep saying all through this year, as it begins to manifest, the solutions that they're going to put forth are ugly. Still Wells, the way of nature has always been to slay the hindmost, and there is still no other way. So again, echoes of survival of the fittest, co-opting of Darwinism. Unless we can prevent those who would become the hindmost being born. For sterilization, again, there it is. It is in the sterilization of failures, meaning people, not actions. Failures as in people. And not in the selection of successes for breeding, that the possibility of an improvement of the human stock lies. Enlightened elite felt good about killing off such people, the people that Charles are talking about, the people who have the classist backers. Enlightened elite felt good about killing off such people because they will have an ideal that will make killing worth the while. This gives birth to the final solution. This gives birth to the policies of the Third Reich, Himmler, Hitler, guys who were broken men. These were broken men lashing out in a country that was lashing out because of the terrible things that Germany was just cut down completely at the knees, their patents taken away, their industry shut down, their ability to have a military, all taken away during the Treaty of Versailles to this highly nationalist state, and then ask them to do $50 million in reparations with no patents, no industry, no country hardly anymore. August 1912, let's go back to the United States here and get away from Wells, and we're going to turn to Harvard University, one of the supposed bastions of learning in this country. August 1912, Harvard President Emeritus Charles William Eliot addresses the Harvard Club of San Francisco on racial purity. Now, these men, this group of elite men in England and America, are threatened by immigration. Immigration is a monster. Dracula. I've kind of beaten that to death tonight, so I don't have to anymore. Especially mixture of racial groups, making the pure bloodlines impure. This is a huge problem for these elitist people. Each nation should keep its stock pure. There should be no blending of the races. This is coming from presidents of Harvard University. There should be no blending of the races. They should keep the stock pure, like you're talking about cattle here, like you're breeding, literally breeding is what they're doing. This included Irish Catholics marrying white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, Jews marrying Gentiles, and blacks marrying whites. All verboten because you don't want to pollute the bloodline. And look where that took us. That took us through the Civil War and into Jim Crow, and then all the way into the 60s. And now after the lockdown and all this resurgence of the hatred of this kind of thing, keeping the bloodlines pure as some kind of form of patriotism. Look at today, the Proud Boys, the Aryan Brotherhood. Now, a man that I deeply respect, Robert Pape, and I've been very honored in the past to edit some of his papers for some academic journals on terrorism and intelligence and the things that he specializes in. He did a study of all of the participants in January 6th, the ones that were arrested, the ones they had files on, the ones they interviewed. And this hatred, this seething hatred, this insurrectionist attitude has to do with the browning of America. And over the past 15, 20 years, I've spoken to many white males in this country who have a seething anger about the browning of America, of watching that privileged position of the white majority slipping away. So this is still happening today. Remember, this is not a history lesson. This is context for current situations. Let me just go here. Hi, Rachel. It's blood and guts survival for the multitude for the benefits of the blue bloods. Absolutely. The noblesse oblige, right. The noble obligation. Or as Jack says to the bartender in The Shining, the white man's burden, Lloyd, the white man's burden. Oh, geez, I'm going to take this on and save the world. No, that's really not what's going on here. Charles also says, yes, Malthus factors into this topic. Absolutely, Joe. I didn't go deeply into Malthus, but Malthus, Galton, these guys, yeah. Simply not enough time for everything. So ex-Harvard President Eliot, coming back to him, supported a second eugenic cause, and that was the forced sterilization of people labeled feeble-minded, physically disabled, criminalistic, or otherwise flawed. Remember that, and remember the acronym MAID, MAID, which is a current thing that we're watching closely, especially with what may be happening in March. And I'm going to get to that tonight. So in 1907 in Indiana, we have the first U.S. eugenic sterilization law. 4 years later, in a paper called The Suppression of Moral Defectives. So now, if you're disabled, now if you're poor, it's a moral issue. Somehow you are morally suspect. You are morally defective. Eliot, again, ex-president of Harvard, declares that Indiana's law blazed a trail. Great job, guys. You're blazing a trail, which all free states must follow if they would protect themselves from moral degeneracy. This starts to snowball, and this is in the early 1900s in America. We're 30-something years out from the rise of the Third Reich, but they're watching, they're paying attention, they're studying. There is a through thread here. Yeah, Joe, it is a huge topic, of course, which is sad. It's sad that we have to talk about this. So Eliot wants to build a global eugenics movement. So Galton started local. Eliot wants to take this worldwide. He becomes the vice president of the First International Eugenics Congress. It meets in London in 1912 to hear papers on racial suicide among Northern Europeans and similar topics. Racial suicide. Don't pollute the bloodline. You're killing us off. We're in danger. Or the browning of America, as the Aryan Brotherhood and Proud Boys and so on and so forth are saying now. Now, all these conferences start to be organized by something called the British Eugenics Education Society. It's right out there. There are these societies. This is a good thing, folks. We're proud of it. A man named Major Leonard Darwin, son of Charles Darwin. So you have half-cousin Dalton. Now you have the son, Major Leonard Darwin, presides over this Congress, the British Eugenics Education Society Conference. It lasts for 5 days. It draws 400 delegates to the Hotel Cecil in London, right out in the open. Here we go, where I'm going to start name dropping. Winston Churchill, who at the time, First Lord of the British Admiralty, he attends. Chief Justice Arthur Balfour of England attends, and the ambassadors of Norway, Greece, and France all attend the British Eugenics Education Society Conference. Here's a quote from Winston Churchill. The unnatural and increasingly rapid growth of the feeble-minded, all capital F, capital M, feeble-minded and insane, capital I, classes coupled as it is with a steady restriction among all the thrifty, energetic, superior stocks. Ooh, so there we go. We have the feeble-minded, the insane, the criminals, the epileptics get pushed into this whole thing. The mentally ill, they're in direct opposition to the thrifty, energetic, and superior stocks, the pure Brahmin bloodlines. Constitutes a national and race danger which is impossible to exaggerate. Now, you've done a wonderful job of exaggerating it, and it's still being exaggerated. I am convinced, says Churchill, that the multiplication of the feeble-minded, which is proceeding now at an artificial rate. The hell does that mean? Proceeding now at an artificial rate. So the feeble-minded are getting together and reproducing just to screw with your bloodlines? That's what Winston seems to be saying here. It's a little paranoid. Unchecked by any of the old restraints of nature. So nature's screwing up, but hey, we can step in. Nature's no longer controlling the gene pool to our elitist satisfaction and actually fostered by civilized conditions. Oh, so nature did it, but civilization fostered it. Okay, is a terrible danger to the race. Okay, which race, sir? The white race. Prior to this, President Theodore Roosevelt, you see, it involves so many of the core people of this country leading up to World War II, created a national hereditary commission to investigate U.S. genetic heritage and to, quote, encourage the increase of families of good blood and discourage the vicious elements in the crossbred American civilization. Polluting the bloodline was bad. Roosevelt says it. Churchill says it. Wilson says it. Presidents, prime ministers of the most powerful countries on this planet are using these words over and over again. I'm sure you're starting to get the picture here. The Carnegie Institution, Carnegie, right? One of the robber barons, helped establish the Eugenics Record Office. Good evening, Ron. Forced sterilization existed in the U.S. until the 1960s as policy. There you go. And there are some that would still want to bring it back. 1911, and Craig and I talked about this with Woodrow Wilson. New Jersey governor at the time signs eugenics law, sterilizing the feeble-minded, conflicts, epileptics. Tanya worked for the Epileptic Society of New Jersey for years. And there are graveyards full of epileptics who were put in these horrible places under horrible conditions. Epileptics. Many of us know epileptics, and they were put in the same area. And he campaigned for governor under part of his platform was for forced sterilization. Remember, 1907, while he's campaigning, Indiana's actually doing it and getting high marks for it from President Emeritus of Harvard. 1914, President Emeritus of Harvard, Eliot comes back and organizes the first national conference on race betterment in Battle Creek, Michigan. Eugenics becomes part of the intellectual mainstream at Harvard. If you're a Harvard professor, you should be on board with this. Administrators, faculty, alumni are going out into powerful positions and seating. That's what these big Ivy League schools do. They indoctrinate a certain elitist philosophy and they send them out into the world to seed it in corporation and entertainment and every other place. They write academic articles. They lobby government to enact eugenics laws. Now you have the government with the classist backers, the pure bloodlines dictating terms. As we talked about with Wilson, you had the J.P. Morgans, the Rockefellers, so on and so forth, who are seeding these ideas, and eugenics is part of it. It is supported by progressives, by reformers, by educated elites, quote unquote educated, as a way of using science to make a better world, leading the way for the DuPonts and all of the rest of the horrific, who created Agent Orange and all these other, Monsanto paving the way, better world through science. What did I think it was DuPont that said better world through chemistry. So there you go. Frank W. Taussig, a Harvard economist, said the human race could be immensely improved in quality and its capacity for happy living immensely increased if those of poor physical and mental endowment were prevented from multiplying. There it is again. Certain types of criminals and paupers breed only their kind. So it's hopeless. You're never going to get out if you're born into it. It sounds more like the Hindu caste system, doesn't it, than democracy in America. Society has a right and a duty to protect its members. So these people are not a member of society. So if you're born in America in the early 1900s into poverty, and there's plenty of that all across this country, you were not a part of society. I mean, listen to the language. A Harvard economist, from the repeated burden of maintaining and guarding such parasites. So now they're parasites. They're sucking the life out of society, and this becomes more prevalent. You're going to hear it. Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr., father of the Supreme Court Justice, who happened to be dean of the Harvard Medical School. You see, fathers and sons tightly linked, the inheritance, the pure bloodlines, the royalty. Ironic that Washington did not want to be called his grand emperor and great king in all perpetuity, or whatever the hell they wanted him to be called, because we still came back to royal bloodlines here in this country, and we've seen it over and over. Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr., Dean of Harvard Medical School, writer and father of the future Supreme Court Justice, as I said, was a supporter of eugenics, as many of his Harvard colleagues were. It was almost the price for admission at Harvard at this time. Holmes actually wrote about human breeding before Francis Galton did. He coined the phrase Boston Brahmin in 1861. Now we're going all the way back to the seeds, 1861. Oh, the American Civil War, issues of slavery, issues of race, to describe his social class, the Boston Brahmins, as a physically and mentally elite, identifiable by its noble physiognomy and aptitude for learning, which he insisted were congenital and hereditary, not conditional. That if you feed a kid, if you keep them safe, if you keep them healthy, their brain is healthy, their body is healthy, and they'll do better in school. And when you're in an elite neighborhood, you get better teachers because you pay more money, and that's going on today. We see it everywhere. The great disparity of education in this country. And there are the seeds right there. Somehow the bloodline, the elitism dictates your future. And this is why I am a big champion of equality of opportunity. That's not what they're talking about here. They're not even talking about maybe getting a slower start. They're talking about getting no start at all, because you're degenerates and you're polluting and all the other horrific things that I put. Now, in 1875, there was an article in the Atlantic Monthly that Wendell Holmes Sr. wrote. If genius and talent are inherited, as Mr. Galton has so conclusively shown, why should not deep-rooted moral defects show themselves in the descendants of moral monsters? Okay, I'm just going to keep going. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, now the son, pens a majority opinion in 1927 in a case called Bell versus Buck, where he agreed that Carrie Buck should be forcibly sterilized. And he wrote this: 3 generations of imbeciles are enough, referring to Carrie's mother, Carrie, and Carrie's child, a direct echo of his father. A noble physiognomy and aptitude for learning, which he insisted were congenital and hereditary. So if you're born into poverty, we don't want you, you're garbage. This is in a Supreme Court opinion. So everybody's going crazy about what the Supreme Court is doing now. 100 years ago, this is 96 years ago, same business. It's a continuum. I have to laugh when people say, what has happened to this country? Absolutely nothing. It was founded on the same principles that have led it to where it is today. It's an absolute continuum. Guys like Henry Wallace, guys like JFK, even guys like Thomas Jefferson, although he's polluted by, his relationship with slavery. But that aside, have tried to change the course. Even Andrew Jackson, who's extremely, extremely complicated, tried to stand up to the international banks. But it is a continuum because you have the education, you have the politics, you have the entertainment system reinforcing it. D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation. Lawrence Lowell, Harvard president from 1909 to 1933. That's a long time. 24 years, imposed a quota on Jewish students and kept black students from living in the yard. He joined eugenicists in calling for sharp immigration limits. There is a need for homogeneity in a democracy. Are you kidding me? Think about that. You want everybody the same in a democracy? It seems like a democracy should be diverse and inclusive. And that is the argument that we're still having today. Now, Lawrence Lowell gave the Eugenics Record Office access to Harvard records to study physical, intellectual attributes of alumni fathers and sons. This is the exact work that the Nazis were doing through the Anna Nerba when they started going around taking skull measurements in Tibet, South America, other places, looking for this ideal. And Harvard president was fostering it, allowing it, right but up to 1933, the rise of the Third Reich in Germany. Charles says here, the natural superiority of the sons of wealth should be obvious by now. Absolutely. So I'm going to stop hammering it, and I'm just going to, go a little quicker here. Botanist Edward M. East said the Negro is inferior to the white. Same for Jews, Italians, Asians, and other foreigners. So I'm right in there. I'm right in there with them. The early settlers came from stock which had made notable contributions to civilization. Immigrants, a considerable part of these people, are genetically undesirable. Dracula, man, Dracula is just coming in. He's pouring in through Ellis Island and polluting the poor Brahmins in Boston and screwing it up for them. Stanford's president, Yale's most acclaimed economist, Irving Fisher, leaders of the eugenics movement at the time. The University of Virginia was a center of scientific racism, with professors like Robert Bennett Bean, who author of such works of pseudoscience, all of this is pseudoscience, as the 1906 American Journal of Anatomy article, Some Race Peculiarities of the Negro Brain. Really? Yeah. Okay. In 1923, the American Eugenics Society was formed by those who thought they had the authority to determine who lives, who dies, and who is sterilized. We made a really good case for that so far. 1923, they codify it. They get into the American Eugenics Society. Also involved were scientists and leading minds in academia and society. Now I'm going to look at this note right here before I read it so I don't get myself into trouble. If it checks out, I'll read it for you here. So just hold on 1 second here. All right, so there are some comments in the they're too long to read now for me to still finish on time, but you can read them in there. So let's talk about some of the people now who push forward eugenics. And I think this is going to be eye-opening. And these are the pictures in the banner that I use for promotion. Helen Keller said this: our puny sentimentalism has caused us to forget that a human life is sacred only when it may be of some use to itself and to the world. Who determines that? And who determined that for you, Helen? Lucky Annie Sullivan was there, yes? She called for physician juries for defective babies to decide which ones lived and which died. Good thing they didn't do that to you, Helen. It is the possibility of happiness, intelligence, and power that give life its sanctity, and they are absent in the case of a poor, misshapen, paralyzed, unthinking creature. Or some would say, Helen, someone who was deaf and blind and mute. To allow a defective child to die was weeding of the human garden that shows a severe love of true life. Again, who the hell makes you the arbiter of what a true life is? Nuts. George Bernard Shaw, who on one hand was a socialist, on one hand who was writing for the rights of others, but also who wrote Pygmalion, which is a Moro Jekyll-esque kind of story, and Man and Superman, which gave rise to the Ubermensch, right? And Friedrich Nietzsche and all of that then leads to to the superiority complexes of the Nazis and the Übermensch. George Bernard Shaw wrote this: "We should find ourselves committed to killing a great many people." Oh, mass slaughter now. "Whom we now leave living, and to leave living a great many people whom we at present kill." So we're killing the wrong folks, is what he's saying. "A part of eugenic politics would finally land us in an extensive use of the lethal chamber." The lethal chamber. Who put that into effect? "A great many people would have to be put out of existence simply because it wastes other people's time to look after them." Whoa. Interesting. Joe says, Joe Redmiles, friend of the show, goes back to ancient Roman times. The exposing of babies they decided were defective. Yes. And of course, in China, and, female babies as opposed to male babies, it's all very, very terrific, horrific. Sorry, I'm trying to look in the, sorry about that. Margaret Sanger, who Craig brought up, founder of Planned Parenthood, racist solutions to overpopulation. There is abundant research out there, folks, and I will tell you this, and then I'm going to get off it quickly. William Gates Sr., father of Bill Gates, was a board member of Planned Parenthood, and there is a lot of very compelling research out there that he was also a eugenicist, and that perhaps the apple does not fall far from the tree. And anybody who has watched this show and knows me knows that I am no fan of Bill Gates and the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, and all the rest of them. Right. And Shadow, I did a bunch of research after I talked to you, and I am going to get to that. Now, Joe says, true about Sparta. Sparta was a military state. Do we give them a little bit of a pass because they were such a highly militarized state? Not sure. Francis Crick, you know that name? Nobel Prize, discovered DNA. Oh, yeah, that guy. The main difficulty, this is a quote from him, the main difficulty is that people have to start thinking out eugenics in a different way. The Nazis gave it a bad name, and I think it's time something was done to make it respectable again. Francis Crick, discoverer of the double helix DNA. The main difficulty is that people have to start thinking out eugenics in a different way. The Nazis gave it a bad name, and I think it's time something was done to make it respectable again. There's the proof in the pudding, man. The Nazis were a blip on the radar, and they screwed up because they went way the hell too far. So now we got to course correct. Thank you very much, Himmler, Hitler, and all the rest of you guys, Liebenfels and all the rest. I suggest, this is Crick still, I suggest attempting to solve the problem of irresponsible people, and especially those who are poorly endowed genetically, having large numbers of unnecessary children. Ooh, the wealth of the welfare queen under Clinton. And you see how this pops up all the time, this indiscriminate, people who go, they like to have 14 kids because it helps on their taxes. Feed and clothe and so on and so forth and house 14 kids, and look how that compares to the tax break you're getting. Doesn't make sense. But here, Crick is saying it. Because of their irresponsibility, it seems to me that for them, sterilization is the only answer. Well, if you can't keep it in your pants and keep these undesirable kids off the planet, we'll take care of it for you. I would do this by bribery. Listen to this. He's got it all worked out, Crick. I would do this by bribery. It would probably pay society to offer such individuals something like, I don't know, 1,000 British pounds down and a pension of 5 British pounds a week over the age of 60. As you probably know, the bribe in India is a transistor radio, and apparently there's plenty of takers. Crick, Nobel Prize winner. Not that we don't have a long line in this country of horrific Nobel Prize winners. One rather recently, in my opinion. Anyway, Alexander Graham Bell, telephone and all that kind of stuff. He sat on the Committee on Eugenics. 1912 to 1918, he was the chairman of the Board of Scientific Advisors of the Eugenics Record Office. In 1921, he became the honorary president of the Second International Congress on Eugenics, which advocated sterilization laws across the country for those Bell called a defective variety of the human race. Now, again, just so you don't think that I'm making parallels and patterns where there aren't any, some of the laws that were created by the International Congress on Eugenics, so on and so forth, served as the models, the actual models for Nazi Germany. There's no escaping this. Now, Bell had more to say. He called for the eradication of the death race. I almost said, did you hear that, Helen Keller? I didn't mean that. I'm going a little too fast here, but you know what I mean. Was Helen Keller aware that Bell is saying that we should eradicate the death race? People do not understand the mental condition of a person who cannot speak and who thinks in gestures. Yeah, they can. It's called American Sign Language. It's called lip reading. It's called stopping and taping a moment for your fellow human being, right? People do not understand the mental condition of a person who cannot speak and who thinks in gestures. He is sometimes looked upon as a sort of monstrosity, thanks to people like you, sir, to be stared at and avoided. Those who believe, as I do, that the production of a defective race of human beings would be a great calamity to the world will examine carefully the causes that lead to the intermarriages of the deaf with the object of applying a remedy. So now the deaf shouldn't get married because they're monsters and we don't know their mental state and they're dangerous and they're going to cause a calamity in the world. Deaf people. Okay, very nice. We've had some deaf people on our show. Intelligent, kind-hearted, wonderful people. Another person, Alex Carroll, atheist, Nobel Prize 1912, physiology or medicine. Another Nobel Prize winner. Here you go. Quote, in recognition of his work on vascular suture and the transplantation of blood vessels and organs. Okay, sounds very Moreau to me. 1935, Carroll wrote a book arguing deviant humans should be suppressed so hereditary biological aristocracy could increase. He's a Dr. Moreau, folks. He appeared on the cover of Time magazine with hero Charles Lindbergh on January 13th, 1938, while the Nazis were really ramping up. And guess what? Charles Lindbergh was a eugenics supporter. Carroll was also the father of the gas chamber. So remember that quote where they said, oh, maybe we need a chamber? I believe that was George Bernard Shaw. Okay, so Carroll was one of those guys, Nobel Prize winner, helped get this going. Said, a euthanasia establishment equipped with a suitable gas would allow the humanitarian and economic disposal of those who have killed, committed armed robbery, kidnapped children, robbed the poor, or seriously betrayed public confidence. He said this in his book, Man, This Unknown. Okay, the humanitarian and economic disposal of those who have killed, committed armed robbery, kidnapped children, robbed the poor, seriously betrayed public confidence. So let's take it a little farther. Let's make it gays. Let's make it Jews. Let's make it Catholics. Let's make it physically and mentally defective. And then you have the Holocaust. All set up by these elitist men. Joe says, I just flashed to one of the final scenes of the movie Seven, John Doe's diatribe in the back of the police car. Right on. We still do see it here in places. All right, now you asked about Huxley. Here are the Huxleys. Inspired by predictions about reproductive technology by biologists J.B.S. Haldane and Julian Huxley in the 1920s, Huxley's brother Aldous wrote the satirical novel Brave New World. I highly recommend you read that if you have not. It shows where this could go, and it smacks of transhumanism, which is very, very serious. Julian headed up UNESCO. That's the United Nations Economic, Social, Cultural Organization. Okay, UNESCO, and also the British Humanist Association. British Eugenics Society Vice President, 37 to 44. So during the Third Reich. And President, 59 to 62. He wrote New Bottles for New Wine. That very much sounds like transhumanism. And coined the term transhumanism. So there you go. He was heavily funded by the Rockefellers. Hello. There you go. So let's talk about today in the time that I have left. What does this all mean for us today? Because it's not a history lesson, as I was saying. Test tube babies in the mid-1970s. That was a very big deal there. Okay, and for some parents, okay, this is a good thing. In vitro fertilization in the 70s and the 80s, three parent babies, so called, embryos made by mitochondrial transfer, moving healthy mitochondria from a donor cell to an egg with faulty, potentially fatal versions. All right, still not so terrible, still gave people children who wouldn't otherwise have them. But then we get into the genome editing tool, CRISPR Cas9, developed in 2012. This is still going on now. Uses natural enzymes to target SNP genes with pinpoint accuracy. This can eliminate mutant genes. The problem here to me is that the moral barometer in general of our leaders, the elite, is really what they were accusing of the undesirables to have. They have a very low moral barometer because their ego and morality, their version of morality, their wettigo, their mental illness of greed, disallows for any kind of moral decision making. So that's the problem there. Eliminate mutant genes. Who decides what the genes are that are mutant, that cause severe, mostly rare diseases? Clinical trials underway. According to Whitney Webb in a recent interview, Whitney Webb, this gets greater funding, CRISPR, than mRNA research, other mitochondrial RNA research. We're into the age of gene typing, early prediction of disease, which can be used as a weapon. When they were first talking about this, an employer could decide whether or not to hire you because in 10 years, doing something, sorry, trying to do too much at once. Stem cell research, designer babies with gene menus from frozen embryos. All this is going on. Now, you should know that BlackRock, which has like a $4 trillion operating capital, that BlackRock, I believe, bought up 44% of all the houses, single family houses last year. You should really be watching BlackRock. And those of you who are invested in Bitcoin and have high hopes for it, they have applied to basically do an investment through Bitcoin. It's probably going to corrupt it, get rid of it, destroy it, so they can co-opt it. So they'll either be the central bank digital currency or more like individual bank digital currency coins or tokens. So digital tokens. This is all about this move to digital feudalism. BlackRock, not a good thing. But they have owned Ancestry.com outright since 2020, and they are also heavily invested in 23andMe, and they increased their shares in November of 2023. That is dangerous as hell. There are also some very, very nefarious guys who are corrupting technology using CIA and other money, who may be put in charge of the national health system in England. When you have these big, gutless, moralist, faceless global elites getting involved in health left, right, and everywhere else, and I'm going to talk about that a little more, this is highly problematic, folks. Watch it. Watch it. BlackRock owns Ancestry since 2020, heavily invested in 23andMe, increasing shares in November 2023. In 2021, in BMC Medical Ethics, there was an article that analyzed 56 articles referencing Frankenstein in terms of scientific responsibility and the limits of science in biomedicine. My big hope, not only that it will entertain people and shock people and make them think in all the best ways about all of this stuff for my musical and for my novel, Three Gothic Doctors and Their Sons, is that this will keep this alive. You will see the dangers of this hubris. You will see how it devalues life. The creatures that Frankenstein created were living human people. The species that Moreau operated on were animals that have their own individual rights in a just world anyway. Then we get into, and this is a little teaser for when I finally do transhumanism, cybernetics and robotics, the Turing test, singularity, AI. AI is a big thing now, artificial intelligence. And I will tell you, it is not artificial intelligence. It is highly, highly fast and very elegant databases. That's why they need this machine learning. That's why they need these language models. And that's why people like OpenAI, ChatGPT are being sued from everyone from the New York times to individual authors to big publishing companies because people's works are being stolen. I saw a list where you could go in and check, and I know people personally whose novels were taken as language learning models. Facebook has a version of Midjourney, generative visual art, generative AI. That's very nice and easy to use. They're being upfront. They're saying, look, we took 1.1 billion images from Facebook and Instagram. Anybody who posts on Facebook and Instagram since day one has known that they can do whatever the hell they want with your stuff. And we would say, who the hell wants pictures of a family vacation? But I typed in a description of a photo of myself that I use a lot in a certain costume. And what came up unquestionably had been using my photo. That's the price of admission. The problem with open AI, ChatGPT, and things like Midjourney is they're not being upfront. They're saying that their language models and the databases they used are proprietary. Problem is they're in copyright conflict. So we're looking at all of this stuff now. Also, a lot of very smart people will tell you that this whole sentient thing that Google and OpenAI and Elon Musk and all these people are claiming is basically BS. It's basically a fake it till you make it to get people thinking and accepting this kind of thing. You know, I think it was Google, maybe it was Facebook, I don't know, Meta, whatever, just came out with their latest robot. These things don't even have faces. They're not human. They don't look human. They aren't human. So anyway, there's that. What we really have to look for is biotech, transhumanism, being spearheaded by Yuval Harari, the idea of Homo Deus, man as God. We no longer need man. I mean, we no longer need God. Man is the God, this cyborg, Borgian, whatever the hell they think is a good idea. It smacks of the Nazis, of an uber elite. Elon Musk plugging you into the neural link and all this, which even though animals are dying left and right, there are some humans, you know, who are volunteering for tests here. I want to tell you one name tonight, Robert Carliff. This guy was FDA, ran it under Obama. Then he went to work for Google Health and Verily Life Sciences for the Google parent company, Alphabet, then went back for Biden to the FDA. This is a serious problem. We're seeing this all over, and I'm going to talk about it a lot with transhumanism. We'll cover it at appropriate times with Sinister Mysteries. Same thing when we talked about the Federal Reserve, Craig and I. You got Secretary of Treasury becoming head of the Federal Reserve and going back and forth. No, this isn't separation of church and state. This is private-public partnerships that are highly, highly dangerous. And why the hell does a Google search engine need to have a Google Health and Verily Life Sciences arm? Because they're way the heck more than what they say they are. Not only are they monitorizing big data, your personal information, and finding ways to lure you into providing it, although most people just do it freely. So this Robert Carliff was very deep in big pharma, complicit in the opioid crisis, and here he is running FDA policy for our last two Democratic presidents. Now, before I go here, 1927, Fritz Lang, Metropolis. Man usurping God. That is absolutely right, Shadow. And you and I are working on some stuff to get this message out. Joe, next they want us to carry around a listening tracker all the time. I know they're lining up to volunteer our DNA. How's that for marketing, right? And that's BlackRock. That's why you have it, so you can monetize it. So there you go. I want to touch on this before I leave. The medical assistance in dying, MAID, MAID. What a horrible, ill thought out acronym. MAID sounds like, oh, someone's going to come in and clean things up for you, clean up your mess. The MAID. No, we're talking about life here. So this was started in 2016 in Canada. Now, Canada has an extremely long history of genetics. Tommy Douglas, who is credited with shaping the entire Canadian healthcare system, was a eugenicist. And word is, and they're trying to suppress it, but there are people in the United States as well as in Canada and people all over the world who are well aware that they are targeting with this MAID program, this medical assistance in dying program, those with disabilities and mental illness. And it's presenting it to them as their only option. It goes back to all the quotes that I gave you that I've been hitting you with this past hour. It's all right there. Now, mental illness as being eligible for medical assistance in dying was suspended in 2021, right when it was floated to put it out. People said, no way, we're not going to have it. It is due again to reactivate in March, in 2 months. Please watch this carefully. I think a lot of what's going on in Canada and other places, they're fixing to trot it out here in the United States. Joe says, I believe there are about 2 cell phones for every human on the planet. There's your listening tracker. Your listening tracker, also a very suggestive hertz range that was used in Montauk and in other places and was set as the standard. I think it's about 420 hertz. Makes a suggestibility. You're sitting there scrolling through your phone. Not only is that scrolling set up for a certain thing, but whatever's beaming out of that phone into your head, into your body, is also setting up those conditions. So you're exactly right. So I appreciate you guys kept me very, very busy in the chat room tonight, and I appreciate that, your input, your thoughts. This is a very important topic to me. As you know, I get very, very passionate about it. I am all about justice, and this is the absolute opposite of justice. So thank you all. Next week, Craig and I are going to look at the horrific life of Henry Kissinger, who recently passed on. One less evil person in the world, although his legacy is absolutely everywhere, and his fingerprints are in economic criminality and war crimes, and he wrote a book with one of the founders of Google, Eric Schmidt, about AI. That's Joe. I believe you're reading that book now. It's absolutely horrific what these people think is a good idea. So we're going to keep bringing these things to you. Craig and I are also going to talk about Bohemian Grove. All we did was mention that we were going to do Bohemian Grove a couple episodes ago when we were doing Montauk 2, and there's a Encyclopedia Britannica entry about the Bohemian Club, very benign, that YouTube put on our video page, which I've said it before and I'm going to keep saying it. This is a form of censorship. This is saying to audience members, people who go to engage with the video, that we are saying things that are inaccurate that YouTube needs to correct. That is an absolute undermining of authority. I have been studying this stuff my entire life. Do not come at any of it casually, and that's the world that we're living in right now. So everybody, take care, be well. I hope your year is off to a good start. I mean, we had 23 capitals, state capitals in this country, capital houses, evacuated or put into lockdown yesterday because of an email claiming a bomb threat. There was another school shooting today. I could go on and on. It's very strange what happened with the deputy Hamas getting killed in Beirut. Then they're having a funeral service in Iran, and there's a bombing that kills 100 people. Please just keep your eyes wide open. I'm learning more and more things about all of the messages that are embedded in Leave the World Behind. So we're going to keep tracking this stuff, and we're going to keep bringing it to you as long as they let us. So everyone, have a great night. Thank you all. I would do this if I was even talking to myself, and I'm so grateful that I have you all to talk to. So thanks. Have a great night. Bye.